Well, thank you everyone for joining us here today for one of my very favorite topics, sustainability storytelling, or as I'll explain, this is a form of strategic storytelling in just one moment. My name is Michael Jordan. No, not that Michael Jordan. Sorry to disappoint anyone. This is my partner, Peter McLaughlin, who will introduce himself in just a second. Today we're going to share, as advertised, excuse me, we're both a little under the weather. I'll share a range of skills and strategies for how to bring to light, how to illuminate our results, our impact, not just in when it comes to sustainability, but we will also connect the dots to ESG storytelling, even DEI storytelling. If you're working for an NGO striving toward achieving sustainable development goals, one of the world's 17 sustainable development goals, all these skills and strategies will be applicable. My background is as a foreign correspondent, former correspondent over 20 years who reported from 30 different countries, mostly in post-communist Central and Eastern Europe, then in Southern Africa, then a bit in Hong Kong. Now I've been fortunate enough to live on 4 continents, from the US to Europe to Africa to Asia. And then over time, once I began my journalism career, I was deep into my journalism. I also began teaching at universities as a visiting professor of international journalism. And once I moved to Africa, to the tiny African kingdom of Lesotho down in Southern Africa, I then branched into global communications. I'll explain soon how I then applied my international journalism skills and strategies and even storytelling styles to global communications. Now, Peter can introduce himself.
Do you want me to share the slides?
No, I think first a quick introduction, and then we'll talk about what is sustainability storytelling.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Peter McLaughlin. My background is actually from fashion design. So I've actually been a design director, having worked at companies like Versace and Hilfiger in Milan and Hilfiger in Amsterdam. And now I've been in New York working for various companies for the last 15 years. So currently, I recently went and got a master's degree in sustainability from Harvard. And so from that, I'm branching out and building on my career and really trying to help companies and businesses make better, smarter decisions as we progress and try and make the planet better for everyone.
Well, thank you very much for that, Peter. And here we're going to, can everyone now see my screen?
Yes, you just need to go into presentation mode.
Of course. Enough with the technical difficulties. We're going to do the best we can. Apparently we're being somehow spammed. We're going to record this and publish it for all those who signed up. We will certainly send a link to this entire event. So, sustainability storytelling. We've had the introductions. And just to let you know, today's takeaways, okay, we're going to talk a little bit about who exactly our audience is, our target audiences. Then I'm going to share a 4-step formula for how to communicate most effectively and persuasively, to boil down what our core message is and our core strategy for how to hit our target. Then we'll talk about how to unearth your credible evidence, because as you'll see, the main focus of this strategic storytelling. Yes, Peter. Yeah, I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yes, your slides aren't visible on the screen.
They're not?
No.
Oh, well, thank you. Stop share.
Do you want me to try?
Yes, please. Ah, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. So next slide, please. To the takeaways. Yes. And then we'll talk about how to, on the one hand, the challenge is to identify what is evidence. What is our impact? What is evidence of our impact? And then how to unearth that, how to bring it to life in storytelling form. I guess Peter's going to have to control the slides for now. We're experiencing a number of different difficulties here. So strategic storytelling. I myself came up with this definition because we all face a challenge, whether we are individual professionals or working for an organization, working for a company, working for a government agency. We all are under some form of pressure to prove our impact, our results, essentially that we are as good as we claim to be. And if we're trying to appeal to a smart but skeptical audience, we are under that kind of pressure to prove that. And so this idea of strategic storytelling is storytelling, as I write here, storytelling for a purpose as it aims to achieve a strategic objective, especially when we, as individual professionals or as an organization, are under pressure to prove something. Okay, that's why I said this is, on the one hand, we named this event sustainability storytelling. On the other hand, it's really applicable to ESG storytelling. If we're under pressure to prove that we've achieved ESG criteria, if we ourselves are working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we must show, not just tell, that we actually are delivering some results, our impact in that sphere. Similarly, with the world's sustainability development goals, to prove we're not just in a very fluffy way, we're making great progress. No, to prove that we are. And so when the second sentence, a key component of this content of strategic storytelling is what I call concrete, specific, credible, meaning believable, verifiable evidence that can be proved, especially then we confidently present it transparently. Okay, next slide, please. I came up with this silly little visual, but just to explain that, of course, nowadays, we are swimming. We're bombarded by images, by brands, by products, swimming in a sea of brands and products. And this becomes an issue. Next slide, please. This is essentially an issue of a question of media literacy, is how we ourselves can develop a filter, or, well, pardon my French, but a bullshit deflector. The content is flying at us fast and furious. How can we prove that what someone is saying, what an organization is saying, is true? It's a very difficult challenge, of course, right? So on the one hand, we need some sort of filter to identify who is telling the truth. And strategic storytelling, as I'll soon explain, is something of an antidote to disinformation, okay? That it gives us that if we're dealing with an audience that on the one hand is smart and skeptical, okay, they are suspicious, that reflexively, how do we know that this individual or organization, company, government agency is telling the truth? Then on the other hand, but at the same time, they're open-minded, then we counter with some sort of credible evidence, okay? For many, so as I explained, for many, especially for the individuals, companies, and organizations that are actually doing good, okay? Not just doing well, doing good deeds. They have something to show, then how to present it. And that's how and why I say strategic storytelling helps to prove that. And even more so, for those of us, organizations, companies, and all that, if it's an NGO relying on donors, if it's a company relying on investors and shareholders and consumers, customers, if we're able to prove this, then we attract further support. So it's in our self-interest, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, and I will now hand it off to Peter, please.
So ultimately, then we also need to define what greenwashing is. So the client Earth defines greenwashing as advertising and public messaging to appear more climate friendly and environmentally sustainable than a company really is. It's also a technique to use by certain companies to distract consumers from the fact that their business model and activities actually do a lot of environmental harm and damage. Greenwashing is so prevalent, it has actually now been really broken down into various different types of greenwashing. Planet Tracker has showed that there's like green crowding, which is built on the belief that you can hide in a crowd so many, like my background in fashion is very much, there's a lot of green crowding that people will do the bare minimum that they need to get by, because a lot of companies then see sustainability more as a trend rather than a necessity. Green lighting is whenever a company will really focus on one element that they are doing to distract again from all of the bad things they're doing. Green shifting will imply that the consumer is at fault. A lot of oil companies have done that. They were the ones that actually came up with your carbon footprint to try and give individuals their responsibility without actually taking responsibility themselves. Green labeling is the most common one. It's where a lot of companies will put like nature or bio or something, or green leaves or things on the front of their product without actually then people having to check the ingredients or the toxic chemicals or anything that may be in it. Excuse me. Green rinsing is when a company regularly changes its ESG targets. So it'll come out with great targets and say, we're going to achieve this by a certain date, and then quietly either change the date or change the targets. So instead of them being honest and saying we're not be able to achieve it, or they'll constantly shift the goalposts. And then green hushing is the act of corporate management teams underreporting or hiding their sustainability credentials in order to evade investor scrutiny. So that is also really whenever they are doing things, but then they're underreporting what they're doing so that it won't affect their share prices or make them look as if they have, failed in some way. And here is just some examples. These are examples, honestly, within the last 1 or 2 months of various companies and industries who are all being now targeted for greenwashing. So whether it's the airlines, cars, the financial industry, even the Deutsche Bank was raided in Europe because of their greenwashing, and now even Unilever, which is the latest news story. So this can really hurt because you can break the law because of government regulations. You can get fined. Your brand reputation can, customers can really be turned off. And then ultimately, the whole point of this is what you're doing to the planet. But there's also a huge big shift in customer attitudes. So this is a customer attitude from Accenture that they had done after the pandemic. And a huge part of that is that they're really talking about trust and reputation. And so it was a big, huge concern for consumers that, can I trust you to do the right thing for me as a company and not just for your business? Can I trust you to be who you say you are and stand for the things you say you stand for? Customers nowadays are very skeptical, and ultimately they will now pay more for a brand that they believe in and the values that they can stand behind. And so just as an example, for the regulations, this is for within the fashion world. This is a timeline of various laws and regulations that are coming into effect. And so therefore going into 2024, the UK is passing more. Europe, UK now because of Brexit is like a separate entity, but they are really still following what the EU is doing. And even in North America, the New York Fashion Sustainability and Social Accountability Act is expected to be passed in the near future. So who is the target audience? From the Natural Marketing Institute, rather than the general marketing thing of, like millennials and boomers, etc., that people are just put into age brackets, they have actually changed it and looked at people's values. And ultimately, the people who have the same values, like, expands over different age ranges. So the LOHAS, which stands for the Lifestyle of Health and Sustainability, they are the key drivers within sustainability. And so they are the ones that are early adopters. They are very much innovators. They are the ones that they're really propelled by their beliefs and will really be vigilant, both in good and bad ways, because they'll be also the ones that will cancel a company if they're found out for being greenwashing, and they will be very vigilant. And then there's also the naturalites.
Mhm.
So they're the biggest ones that people target. And then there's the drifters, conventionals, and then the unconcerns, the people who do not necessarily follow green things at all. But the good news is that within these LOHAs, whenever the Natural Marketing Institute started measuring this in 2008, they found only 19% of the population were actually LOHAs. The recent report from 2022, that has now increased to a third of the country, which equals 110 million people. And they also believe that they expect this market to grow an additional 10% each year as the effect of climate change becomes increasingly more visible, especially when we are constantly seeing more wildfires, devastation, floods continually like over the planet.
Hey,
And
Peter,
so
just one thing. Peter, just one thing. I see that Alberto just said that he can't hear you so well.
I'm sorry, it's probably also because I have a cold at the minute.
Yes, yes, there's that as
I'll
well.
try and speak up.
Yes.
Um, so just to then focus and drill into what areas are important to LOHAS, the main areas are three. There's transparency, carbon neutrality, and circularity. So the transparency is, again, these are very savvy green customers who are skeptical about all claims. And so third-party verifications and recognized certifications can really build trust to prove that you are walking the talk. Carbon neutrality, they are very aware of, um, how the car, so they are not convinced anymore with, again, with the airlines who are all like coming schemes that you can buy things to offset your flight and things like that. That has now been proven to be just not accurate, and a lot of the money like is very questionable where it goes. Circularity, again, the product that they are looking to buy, so that it's not virgin materials, it can be reused, upcycled, downcycled, and it's therefore staying within the so that we're not using more and more resources as we go, and that then at the end of life, it is not just put into landfill, so it doesn't do harm.
Okay. Thank you for that, Peter, for soldiering on despite your recent COVID diagnosis. Okay. Now let's talk some meat and potatoes. That was very interesting to understand big picture some of the challenges that are out there. Okay. Now regarding our target audience specifically, Peter outlined who the audiences are, but now we're talking and thinking in terms of target audience. And as I often say, there are basically two kinds of audiences out there in the world today. With all due respect, part of that audience are sheep-like, as you see in the left here, okay? Some of them may be our family, our friends. We love them, but they may be sheep-like in that they're following unthinkingly what they see, what they read, what they hear, okay? Versus, on the right-hand side, the critical thinkers, okay? Those who are, and this is one of our own defense mechanisms, our survival skills we all need to develop in this age of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, fake news, is to be reflexively skeptical, okay? So now we're going to be dealing with this skeptical audience, thinking in terms of the skeptical audience, which is not going to reflexively just consume what we say, but is going to have higher expectations, even demanding concrete, credible evidence to prove our case, okay? Go ahead, Peter. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I lay out here, this is a little wordy, but the first category of audience will accept what they hear, what they're told. Again, this is why when we're trying to prove our results, whether it's SDG, DEI, ESG, the whole alphabet soup of acronyms, or more generally speaking, sustainability study, part of the audience, we may say, hey, you know what? I'm okay with appealing to the sheep. But as I also would say, that is that a sustainable formula for success? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. In this situation, we're aiming for a more elite audience. Some people see it as elite as a bad word. In this situation, we're recognizing that in terms of regulatory agencies, right, that are imposing rules, regulations, laws, certain standards. If we're talking about media watchdogs, if we're talking about investors or donors, right, consumers, customers, in general, we should imagine them as critical thinkers. And then, following down the list, then we must respect their intellect. And as I say, work harder to persuade them. How to prove that we are truly as good as we say we are, perhaps even the best. Every company, every brand, every NGO is going to say that they're doing wonderful work. Very few companies, organizations, or government agencies would say, we're so-so, we're quite mediocre, okay? But believe us anyway. No, no. So in this situation, then the challenge is, how do we prove that what we're saying is true and accurate? More than empty words, how do we show, not tell, okay? And especially, not just once, but to make it sustainable over and over, that we're consistently presenting factual information. Go ahead, Peter, next. This is a journalistic expression that I learned long ago, but one that is good to be repeating in the boardroom over and over again. Show them, don't just tell them. The case for credible evidence, okay? That it's not enough to say we're doing a great job when it comes to sustainability, ESG, DEI, SDGs, okay? We must be, this is a question of transparency and accountability, especially if we are confident in our results and our impact. For those companies or organizations that are less confident, that may not have real evidence or real hint of results and impact, they may be more inclined to hyping up without real substance, just telling what they're doing without showing, okay? So what does that mean? What is evidence? Evidence can come in multiple forms. If it's specific research to which we can hyperlink, okay? If we can provide real facts according to whom, that we say what the primary source is. It could be examples, anecdotes. We say, for example, that's a piece of evidence as well. It could be a quote from someone on the ground, on the front lines. Okay, we attach a name, maybe even a face, an image. That's also a form. I'm not saying that one quote, one image, one fact is enough. But the way I describe it is that we need to make a lawyerly argument, as if we're in a courtroom with a judge and jury. So at least 3 pieces of credible evidence to sway that judge and jury, okay? Because we say 3 makes for a pattern or a trend. 1 could be an aberration, a one-off. 2 could be a coincidence. But if we have true evidence, okay, then we should show it in multiple forms to form a pattern, to sway even perhaps a skeptical but open-minded audience. Okay, next, Peter, please. Now, very quickly, years ago, I developed what I call, immodestly, the Jordan 4-step formula, okay? And if we'll send out this this recording. You're welcome to take a screenshot if you like. That this is a way to, on the one hand, this was how I came up with story ideas that I would pitch to my foreign editor in the US or somewhere in the West. On the other hand, this is a way to really narrow down, to whittle down what exactly our core message is, what we want to say and why and for whom, okay? So just briefly, who exactly is our audience? Why are they our audience? Why would or should they read this? What can they learn? How can they benefit? Why should they care? Thinking through, to be able to, we can't be aiming our content blindly, firing in the dark. We need to be able to visualize. The more we can visualize and even empathize with our audience, the more effectively we can aim and even maybe hit our target. Then once we visualize the target, what exactly do we want to say? Okay, what do we want to write? What point, what argument, what idea, what message do we hope to deliver directly to the heart and mind of our target audience? Or what story do we want to tell? But then that's only part of it. Then we make the critical thinking argument, which is, why exactly do we want to say that? Why exactly that message, that point, that argument, that story? And we need to justify, we need to defend our decisions. And I came up with a filter for this, as you see here in italics, to filter out what is our core message. Answer this, finish this sentence. Our audience should find this piece of content, whatever we're going to put on our website, on our social media channels, our audience should find this piece of content not just effective, but persuasive. Because why? Why exactly? Finish that sentence. It's not enough to sit around the conference room table and say, hey, boss, how about we do this? How about we do that? Why exactly do we think it will resonate with our audience? Again, empathetically imagining ourselves in the shoes of the audience, okay? So now we make more of an airtight argument for why exactly that message, that piece of content. And lastly, once we've made the intellectual argument, the critical thinking argument, how exactly do we want to present it or bring it to life? With what evidence, research, details, examples, anecdotes, insights, okay? What photos, what bar graphs, whatever it may be. How exactly are we going to make that loyalty argument to bring it to life? Okay, next, please, Peter. Now, I want to give a very important example, and we're about to get to two of my key strategies that I want to share with you. This is while I was living in Southern Africa, as you see in the middle of the map here in the lower southwest quadrant there, the tiny African kingdom of Lesotho. I lived there for 4 years, from 2011 to 2015. Next slide, please. And as I quickly learned, that Lesotho is a country suffering from some of the worst health indicators in the world, including the world's second highest rate of HIV infection among the most sexually active cohort between 18 and 49. It was 23% HIV infected while I was living there, meaning every single family was somehow touched by HIV, okay? And so it was there that I branched into health and HIV communications, okay? Next. Oh, I'm sorry, before you switch. And so then this one company, you can see them, I'm sorry, this one NGO, an American NGO, Management Sciences for Health, hired me because they said, we are under pressure, Michael, okay? We're under pressure from our donors in Europe and in the US, including USAID, the Agency for International Development. We've been here for 5 years. We've been assisting HIV orphans and their caregivers here in Lesotho, and now we're under pressure that if we hope for continued funding and new sources of funding, we must somehow prove our on-the-ground impact. So, Michael, we'd like to send you up into the mountains of this very mountainous kingdom to interview, as I interviewed 24 of their beneficiaries, 24 HIV orphans and their caregivers, and also grassroots NGOs, to somehow bring to light how exactly MSH had positively impacted their life, okay? So what I did was I conducted interviews, I shot their photos, then I went back home and I wrote up the stories. But as I was doing this, I developed a methodology, a strategy for how to identify impact. Next slide, please. Oh, I should say that then it was published in this digital ebook. All my stories and photos were then published. This woman, I'll give you a quick example. This woman was one of the women whom I interviewed. That's my photo of her, okay? And she, by the way, she already had 2 children. She had 3 children total. 2 children HIV-free. The third child HIV positive because her husband was a minor who had gone into South Africa, presumably had unprotected sex with an HIV positive sex worker, then took it back home, had unprotected sex with his wife, okay? And their third child was HIV positive, okay? Now, this family wanted to have a 4th child, okay? And so, but of course they wanted HIV-free, an HIV-free baby. So they had a choice. They had a choice either to continue living in their world of, with all due respect, of ignorance, not knowing about mother-to-child transmission of HIV, or to go down to a health clinic which was supported by MSH with its nurses and healthcare workers supported by this NGO, okay? So she decided to go to the health clinic to listen to them step by step, meaning there was an intervention by MSH funded supporters, okay, by their beneficiaries. And then step by step, she followed their advice, and lo and behold, she gave birth to, she was taking the antiretrovirals, I should point out, taking the ARTs while the baby was in utero, while the fetus was in utero. And then actually she gave birth to an HIV-free baby, okay? So next slide, please, because then I want to explain. I developed this methodology, which now I apply for all my clients, all my impact storytelling. I call it the fork in the road, okay? Simply put, if you look at the bottom of the arrow, okay, we can describe it's, or more simply put, it's a before and after story, okay? You describe what exactly, but even over the course of an interview, you're thinking about all your beneficiaries in the field, people you impact. If it's sustainability and ESG, what was the situation on the ground? If you're dealing with Indian cotton farmers, okay, what was their reality beforehand? Okay, before your company became involved or before your NGO tried to assist, you described your reality in some detail. What exactly was their life like before? What was their situation like before? Have them paint a picture. We paint a picture with vivid examples, okay? Then their journey begins, or actually it continues upward, okay? Then they hit a fork in the road. Should I turn to the left or turn to the right? Because at that intersection, there's a knock on the door, a virtual knock on the door. It could be an NGO intervening in their life. It could be a company now saying, we want your cotton, okay? And now they decide, okay, we're going to go, we could either go to the left and ignore the knock on the door, the intervention, and we can describe that in the story. If they never done XYZ, here's how their life would have continued. Or we head to the right following this intervention. Okay, in this situation, all these beneficiaries followed the intervention, and then we are documenting, so what was the intervention, in what form, what happened, how, and why, and then step by step, and then what happened, and then what happened, and then what happened. We illuminate the intervention, the influence, and the impact, okay? Next slide, please. And now this is also part of the storytelling. I call this the Darwinian, named after Charles Darwin. I call this Darwinian storytelling in greater detail, okay? In terms of the storytelling, because I believe all companies, organizations, government agencies, if you're talking about any sort of age, any sort of issue, any sort of individuals, it's not enough to superficially describe the reality today, but to have some of the relevant backstory, because no story, no situation happens in a void, in a vacuum. It doesn't happen overnight. There's always a relevant backstory. For example, Peter and I, how we came here today, we didn't just magically appear. We all have a backstory, a narrative, a trajectory. And so in this situation, very briefly, okay, that as you see, there are questions on the screen. First, we identify where exactly the story begins, the origins, what I call the deep past. Where does this story or situation originate? Why exactly does it start there? Then the journey, it's a chronological timeline, not a straight line, but peaks and valleys, okay? The more recent past, which the evolution, how does this story or situation or issue change or evolve over time, and why exactly? We're not just court stenographers describing, we're describing why exactly it changes or evolves the way it does, highlighting key landmarks, key milestones along that journey. Then up to the present, and now if we've effectively highlighted some of the very relevant and necessary background context, then our audience should understand how and why we got to where we are. Again, if we're talking about the impact we've had on people, on communities, on animals, on the planets, okay? We describe the before and after, and here's a way to identify really the journey that our beneficiary or those who are involved with our partners on the front lines are being affected by us, okay? And then even finishing a story with the future. Where does this story or where does this situation go from here, and why there? Okay, next slide, please. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing, but just to show how this also applies to an individual's story as well. The same principles, that they all have a backstory, they all have a journey as to how and why they wound up where they are today, either being positively impacted or not, okay? And then we can also finish off with, where do they go from here? Looking into our crystal ball, we can ask them, interviewing them, where do you think you will go from here, and why do you think you'll go there? Okay, next slide, please. No, next forward, please. Yes, and now I'm even sharing part of my storytelling structure. I call it the diamond storytelling structure. I really should hurry up so we have time for questions. Okay, to open in a colorful, I call it a curtain raiser, but to open in a colorful but relevant way. Then with a quote, hear some words from a real person. Then we connect the dots from that one individual that we've affected, okay, to the big picture of what the real issue is, what the real challenges that we've tried to confront, the real results that we've produced. So meaning that we can identify, if we believe that our company, in terms of our sustainability, ESG, DEI, has had some positive results, we can identify one person, one symbolic example to tell their story up high within a few sentences, then a quote from them. We hear their deep, meaningful words, thoughts, feelings, opinions. But then we say, they're not alone. They are one of hundreds or thousands, or this community is not alone. They are one of dozens of communities whom we've positively affected. But hyperlinking to prove that they are one of dozens or hundreds of or thousands. So one symbolic example opening up just as a diamond opens up to the big picture. Then we can have a quote from one of our experts or someone we quote, looking at the bigger picture of all that's been positively affected. Then the second half, now we have the Darwinian background. We can fold that in, transition to the past, the Darwinian deep past, the more recent past, present, future. Next slide, please. Now we're going to get up to the present. Just one quick example, okay, and then we'll get to questions. Then Peter and I recently spoke with, speaking of Indian cotton, we spoke with the founder and CEO of an Indian fashion company called No Nasties. Next slide, please. And just one quick example, on their website, on their sustainability page, they said, in a very grand way, we remove more CO2 from the air than we create. Maybe gets the audience excited. Wow, that's very impressive, No Nasties of India. And as we told the founder and CEO, where's your evidence? Show us, don't just tell us, okay? Because we're looking at it as Peter's background, obviously, in the fashion industry, but within industry. So I'm looking at from a position of, let's say, if I were the New York Times bureau chief, okay, or BBC correspondent, I'm demanding proof that you've really removed more CO2 from the air than we create. Next slide, please. And so we said that your smart but skeptical audience will demand that. In fact, they're also saying, oh, we're planting X number of millions of trees. Then, you can tell a story from the front lines of maybe the head of your tree planting program as an anecdotal way to open that story for all that you're doing in terms of tree planting, in terms of what you're doing to remove CO2 and to return more of it, okay? And so there is a way to through strategic storytelling to bring to life in a evidence-driven, humanized, but very persuasive way to bring to life your results, your on-the-ground impacts, okay? Peter, what do you think? Should we turn to questions now? Or would you like to share that quick case study of Nike?
Yes. So just very quickly, just to build on what Michael has said. So how can we really apply this generally into a more corporate arena? So, for example, Nike has been really they have been trying to be very sustainable because they were the ones at the very start who were being sued because of their garments were being made in the sweatshop, and were told via the courts that no, this is your responsibility, because the majority of fashion companies were like, oh, that's not our company, it's nothing to do with us, it's just they just make our product. So ever since then, their Nike Grind program has now been going for 30 years. And so they have this whole ethos, which is move to zero. But ultimately, with this, they take the shoes back, and then they turn it into playgrounds, basketball courts, and indoor flooring. But that's where they stop. They don't therefore keep talking to the customers or us about well, what impact has that made? So if they really took that and then said, okay, we built a basketball court in this neighborhood, what did that do? What impact did that have? Did crime go down in the area? Did school attendance go up? Did kids going to college go up? Is there maybe like, does someone get a scholarship who used that basketball court and is now in college because of it? Like, imagine if they had the new Michael Jordan who trained on that basketball court. This is where we're talking about impact and creating storytelling to show the impact of the actions that you're trying to do.
Even long-term sustainable impact, right? Okay, I mean, look, that requires what Peter's talking about, what we're talking about, requires some time, effort, investment too, because that really is, we need to get out there and interview people on the front lines to figure out, not just superficially, hey, we built this facility for kids, but truly 6 months later, 1 year later, even 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, what lasting impact has it had? Peter, next slide, please, and then we'll go to questions. I want to give everyone a chance. So here's what we would do, okay? Here's how you can start, all right? That we believe it's necessary for all your organizations to have a staff meeting around the conference room table, if you haven't had already, which is you say, what is our definition of impact? Let's talk about this. What exactly would our impact actually look like? Then, how do we prove it? What sort of evidence could we illuminate? Could we unearth, right? Pull out, extract, and then even bring to light, okay? Where would we find it? How do we extract it? And then how to illuminate, to bring it to light for our target audience to prove it. So of course, Peter and I would be happy to do those sorts of things with your company, with your organization, if it's to have a strategic consultation to talk about these things, or to have a team training, or even to work with your sustainability marketing communications team. But for now, we'd like to take, if there are a few questions out there. Anyone with a question? Oh, I see.
There's a question in the chat.
Krista. Yes, go ahead. I think this issue is Nike does not want to invest in the outcome of their effort.
Well, in case everyone else can't read it, what Krista says is great point about the Nike initiative. I think the issue is Nike does not want to invest in the outcome of their efforts to repurpose old shoes. It costs money and resources with no return, but I think the return is more customer loyalty to do good for the climate. How do you combat that? Well, I mean, ultimately, I think they are investing. They've also, they've been doing this program for 30 years. The problem is they show a picture of a playground court or basketball court that they've made, and that's it. That's where we're saying to really connect with customers, to show that they are making a difference in lives, and that the sustainability initiatives that they are doing really are impacting local people. That's the part that they're missing. That's the part that what we're saying is that sustainability storytelling, it is important, because ultimately you can say, yes, we've built 100 basketball courts, and like that doesn't say anything. Like, or any company can try and say, oh, we have helped 1,000 people, but ultimately it's getting then that one person and then finding out their story and then telling their story of how their life has changed based on the impact that the company has done, and then really going into it to say they are the tip of the iceberg. So rather than just producing statistics and numbers, which data is very important because that is your evidence, as Michael is saying, but ultimately then you need to humanize that and show what that looks like and put a face onto it. And that's where we're saying that that's why storytelling is important, to really unravel the statistics and really just show a human story connected to it.
If I can address Chris's question as well, it's a great question. I think it's a very fair point, which is that then ultimately skeptics like us will question, well, then really how sustainable, how lasting is that impact, right? They build that facility, the court, and a certain segment of the audience, more sheep-like, may say, wow, bravo, that's great. And that's enough for them, right? we're more skeptical, saying, yeah, but that seems like bells and whistles, right? That seems very very superficial, and truly how deep is the impact? And guess what? So then their content is not really resonating with us, with skeptics. Okay. So yes, it is interesting that they would not want to invest the sort of money and resources. That's understandable. But as we emphasize, this sort of content can then be on your website, in your social media channels, in your internal PowerPoints and pitch decks for 2, 3, 4 years as prime examples of what you've done. Again, if you have multiple examples of this, then you can showcase that for a significant period of time, and maybe it's worth that return of investment to really, let's dig deep into this issue to try to win over those skeptics. Okay. Because ultimately, it's a question of how persuasive do you want to be with your content.
And also, like, you're right, like people are skeptic, and it is ultimately about selling more shoes. But going back to even therefore the LOHAs and the consumers, if you're trying to appeal to all consumers, and LOHAs are very particular, then if you have a choice between going to Adidas, Nike, Reebok, wherever, then you'll go to the one and spend your money that you feel like, okay, but they have a take back program. I'll bring in my old shoes, I'll give it to them, and then I know that they will do something with it, and that therefore it's not going to be in a landfill. So it's about making educated choices. And if you're giving then your consumers options for that, then they will more than likely pick you as the place that they'll spend their money.
Great. What other questions do you have? Any about, for example, how to unearth the evidence, how to recognize what is impact, what is evidence? You know, Peter and I have talked about this before as well, which is what's tricky for us is that there are some companies, some organizations which do not have results, okay? Which do not have evidence, right? I mean, that leads to greenwashing if they still want to produce some sort of content, that sort of thing. So we ourselves are inclined to work with those who actually do have evidence, but may be struggling with how to identify clearly, how to extract, how to bring that to life. Yes, but as we also said, that then this can be worth the return on investment that we think that look into 2024, this is going to be a growing trend as more of these regulatory agencies impose requirements and impose standards that companies and organizations are going to have to figure out how exactly we can prove that we're not bluffing, okay, that we're not greenwashing. And so I would love to hear from others if anyone else has found solutions to how to answer this dilemma with what other sort of content can you counter the accusation of greenwashing more than, but we're not, we promise, we swear we're not. What else can you do but to provide some sort of a lawyerly argument to counter that? Anything else? Maybe you want to show the last screen, Peter, if there are no more questions. We do apologize, of course, for the technical difficulties here. Fortunately, we will have a recording of this, and I personally will be sending this out, a link to the video to everyone who has signed up for the for our session. And if you have any questions, of course, please message us directly. We'd be happy to hear from you. Any other
Mhm.
questions or anything you want to add, Peter?
No, I just think that I understand for a lot of people, sustainability is very daunting and and it can be very overwhelming, and a lot of companies don't know where to start, let alone how to communicate what they want to do or where the little bit that they are doing. That's whenever like it's good to therefore bring someone in to help you figure it out. You know, not everyone's an expert in everything, so that's whenever you reach out to other people to really help you be able to do that. And as Michael said, like ultimately with so many regulations coming, this is not going anywhere. You know, it just isn't. So for companies within America, things is shifting. For things in Europe, it's already shifting. So it's better just get ahead of it and work on things like for it now.
In fact, I think with this growing wave of not just disinformation, but this growing awareness of the negative impact of disinformation, I think this is a growing trend that's companies, organizations, regulatory agencies, and watchdogs are saying enough is enough. We are going to somehow impose certain standards so that more truth is out there and less of the outright lies. So at least this is from our perspective, this is one solution for how to counter
Yes.
that.
And even the UK government, they have already given their own um, touch points for consumers so that they can spot greenwashing. So it's if governments are not really getting involved, it's the education is going to be more there. So that's why it's best to totally avoid greenwashing, tell the truth, be transparent, and then ultimately, then you can communicate the impact that you're doing effectively because you will have the evidence to back it up if anyone calls you out.
It's a question of confidence too. If you
Yes.
have the confidence, you present. If not, then we understand your trepidation, of course. Okay, well, oh, here's a question. I'm sorry. Can a brand gain any traction? Peter, you want to read that?
Uh,
Scott had a question.
Sorry, I don't see that
Turn to
question.
their
Can you read
business.
it out?
Well, that's an interesting question. Can a brand gain any traction by publicly acknowledging the sustainability challenges inherent to their business and their aspiration and plans to overcome it? Oof. So basically saying we know we're having impact, we know we're doing good, but we're not quite sure how to present this or how to show this or how to overcome it. I can't imagine that would be a positive. If I were advising in terms of crisis communications, I would solve that question in-house. We need to say something in terms of a lawyerly argument. Just I love the visual of imagining ourselves entering a courtroom with a judge and jury, that we wouldn't necessarily approach the judge and jury and say, we know our client is innocent. We're just struggling to prove that right now. You're going to have to take our word for, or can you help us out, judge and jury, to help us recognize the challenges that we're facing. You maybe to have a suggestions box, but only if you're going to be responding. People hate to give suggestions if they're going to fall on deaf ears. If you're going to prove, I mean, that's an interesting idea. Now that we're just brainstorming, if you were to be open to your suggestions, to public suggestions, and then act on it and show that you've acted on it versus just lip service. Yeah. We want to hear from you. We want to empower you, right? Shareholders, stakeholders, consumers, customers, and then not act on it. That would probably be counterproductive. What do you think, Peter?
I think honesty is the best policy. I think people are way more understanding if you're upfront and honest about it. If you're trying to manipulate the situation, they can smile at a mile off. So, yes, you need to handle the situation. It's been happening recently. Like Zara had to take down a whole campaign. And the best thing that they could do was just apologize. That was not the intention. Really discuss it up front, and then move on. It's whenever it gets drawn out and lingered, you're only going to make the situation worse, and it can grow into much more of a bigger crisis than it really needs to be. Ultimately, everybody learns, and even within sustainability, it constantly is shifting continuously, and the goalposts are moving as technology is evolving. But you need to like going, okay, when we know better, we'll do better, and that's all that you need to know. In the sense that we weren't aware, now we are. We'll shift, we'll adjust, and we'll evolve.
And I appreciate Colleen's addition here, saying that generally transparency has been seen as a best practice to address greenwashing. I agree. I mean, it sounds hokey, of course. Honesty is the best policy. But again, when you consider our target audience, of an elite audience, right? Talking about the challenges, but that we are to show that we are trying to minimize our impact on communities, on animals, on the planet, that sort of thing, right? That is the challenge. Or if it's in the DEI sphere, to show that we are making good faith efforts, right? But face challenges. I mean, going back to what Scott said, yes, as part of to show, but by the way, I should say, I think as far as the storytelling, it's very fair. If I'm understanding Scott's question even more clearly, which is that there's a storyline you can come up with, a narrative, which is while we've achieved X, Y, Z, challenges A, B, C remain. Okay, that's perfectly fair to show. It's not that we solved everything or everything is rainbows and unicorns now. Okay, we've made some progress, right, in XYZ, yet challenges remain. I think that's very fair because, as we say, there's always room for improvements, right? No one would fault you for not solving everything at once, I think. Okay.
And I would agree, and I think that that's where you'll get leniency from customers if they feel you're being genuine.
Thank you,
And
Scott.
like
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
for
Yeah.
for example, it's like at the minute, you know, a lot of companies are jumping on the band. A lot of fashion companies are jumping on the bandwagon for recycled polyester, but it's ultimately misleading for consumers because it wasn't polyester to begin with. Polyester is just the technical term of plastic because it's made from plastic bottles that is turned into a fiber, and the fiber is the polyester. So when people think it's less than 1% of clothing is actually made from previous clothing, the majority of it all goes into a landfill. So for customers buying, oh, this is recycled polyester. It used to be a polyester top. Now it's a swimsuit. That's not true. It was plastic bottles. And the problem now with it, as the situation evolves, because it was a good thing at the time, is that what was a circular product of plastic bottles continually being able to be recycled, you're taking that out of a circular business model and now putting it in the fashion world as a linear business model as a new top, which after then it's not going to be recycled anymore. So that's where the issues come. And then as the situation evolves, you can be like, oh well, we weren't aware of that, let's course correct and make better decisions going forward.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Peter, and for all those who were bearing with us and joined us despite the technical difficulties. We appreciate that. We will be following up again, sending a link to the video. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day or your evening from wherever you're tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.